Yo, since this video is part 2 of a 2-part series, link to part 1 is in the iCard, I'm gonna basically skip right into the action. But just in case you need a reminder, Super Mario Sunshine But the Floor is Lava is a mod made by Master Matt K that, you guessed it, makes much of the floor deadly for Mario to stand on. The only external rule applied to this challenge run is that no major skips are allowed unless they're necessary. Okay, assuming you haven't skipped past this section, let's now get into the gameplay. Last we left off, I had just beaten Pianta Village right after Gelato Beach and Bianco Hills. Following the standard any percent route, I decided it was now time to head into Pinna Park. Loading into episode 1, I figured the most direct route would be to use this Noki's head to make it onto this piece of temperate floor, then onto the tree, then into the loading zone. Loading into the park itself, something immediately became very apparent to me. Pinna was going to be easier than the previous worlds. Since Pinna Park has a lot of different objects, enemies, NPCs, and so on, I would have plenty of options and where I could bring Mario. This made entering the Mecha Bowser loading zone pretty straightforward, and the actual roller coaster battle itself wasn't any different than normal. Into Pinna 2, things got just a bit more interesting. Obviously, I used the trees to get closer to the mole. Interestingly, however, when Mario is high up in this level, the bullet bills shoot towards Mario at light speed for whatever reason, so actually approaching the mole was a bit treacherous, but alas, I made my way to the cannon, and after a few attempts, was able to clip through the mole into the loading zone. If you didn't know, by the way, that's a trick called mole skip. Basically, the mole doesn't have a hurt box during specific windows, which lets Mario skip right through it. Yeah, that's right, I said hurt box. I'm a melee player. Actually, I'm not a melee player. I don't know why I said that. In terms of secret stages, this one was on the easier side. After making my way past the trampoline section, I learned by necessity that Mario can stand on top of the metal arrow signs here, which is pretty weird since he can't stand on top of most other signs throughout the game, and after a mistake or two, I was able to make it out of there with a brand new shine sprite. Moving on to episode 3, Red Coins of the Pirate Ships, it was alright. I had quite a lot of trouble getting the first coin, which was kinda sad because it shouldn't have been as hard to get it, it was just some simple timing. After a few tries though, I finally got it, and in contrast to the first coin, the rest of them were a piece of cake, as they're far above the lava. With Pinna 4, Master Matt K, the creator of this mod, was a little gracious. Gracious enough to give me a useless block that didn't help me at all with getting the Snooze-A-Koopas to bury themselves in the sand. God, that was mean. Basically, the block was just above grass and not sand, and even if it was above sand, the snooze coops probably would have just hit the block instead. Luckily though, I was able to use this basket here along with a well-timed hover to get the snooze coops to sink themselves in the sand. I've been saying sand this whole time, which might be a bit confusing to some of you, since this piece of ground is clearly lava and not sand. Basically, I'm referring to the ground's collision value when I say sand or grass. A collision value in Sunshine just determines how the surface Mario is, in this case standing on, interacts with it. So for instance, if this piece of floor has the collision value for sand, then Mario will make footprints in it and will sink in it when falling from high enough, despite the fact that this piece of floor looks like wood and not sand. This also applies to Snooze-A-Koopas as well. They can only get stuck in a floor that has the assigned collision value of sand. And as you've probably already guessed, Matthew kept the default sand collision values assigned to where they're supposed to be. Anyways, moving back to the gameplay, as an extra bonus as well, I got a window of safety from damage boosting off the Koopas. And aside from a few deaths, including one where Mario was somehow clipped under the floor, this level became quite trivial to complete. Since no major skips were allowed, it was time for me to move on to Pinna Park episode 5, a shine I rarely have to collect these days. To get to the Ferris wheel, I jumped across the trees to the metal grates, where I was able to make my way up to this area at the top of the grates. From here, you can actually just hover through the Ferris wheel for some reason, and of course, from this point on, I did the level the intended way, as little level as there was left anyways. Now, episode 6, the Yoshi-Goron secret, was actually pretty interesting. Going into this level, Yoshi's desired fruit was a coconut. Now, I could have just reset the level until Yoshi wanted a papaya, which would have been the easiest fruit to get, but I thought that would have been kinda lame, so I decided to commit to the coconut. It took me a few tries, but I was able to spray this coconut off the tree and onto the Yoshi-Go-Round so that Mario could pick it up. Now, without a hover nozzle, I got Mario on top of the Yoshi-Go-Round, a bit unsure of where my path from here would be. The close by awning seemed like a good option, so I jumped there, with the plan to jump from awning to awning to reach the shell ride. Speaking of which, what even is this ride? Is it even really a ride? Whatever, I'm getting off track. From the shell ride, I jumped onto the nearby railing. First try, I promise. From the railing, I got Mario onto the pink, non-bouncy awning. And from there, well, you guys can see for yourselves. Maybe not. Like, if I can If I time my jump just a little... Yo! I thought I didn't make it. Yeah, I'm not really sure what path the coconut took to get to Yoshi even now, so it's safe to say I got quite lucky there. But this is where my luck ran out, because from here, it was all skill, baby! And by that, I mean to say I pulled off some sick infinite flutter jumps, and that's really it. No, 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 no. Yo, I'm a gamer. From here, since Yoshi has to be orange for Mario to enter the Yoshi Goron secret, I made my way to the bridge so Yoshi could eat the nearby pineapple, which of course made Yoshi orange. And I went for the pineapple instead of the papaya because the papaya was just too hard to get. And from there, it was just some simple platforming to reach the Yoshi Goron. Once in the secret, things remained actually pretty intense. Since all the red platforms were covered in lava, I'd skip straight to the green platforms, which I was having some difficulty with. But with something called a buffered spin jump, not to be confused with a momentum spin jump, I was able to get Mario onto a green platform, where I promptly killed him. Once I got to the green platform again, I struggled to find a path through the secret, but similarly to Bianco 6 from the previous video, the trick here wasn't to find a clever way to manage the cycles, but just to go fast instead. But when that proved to be just a little too difficult, I instead decided to try the green platform to the wall, where I do a trick that lets Mario wall jump dive the opposite way he's supposed to, which is called a glitchy wall kick dive, or GWKD for short. After a few attempts, I was able to GWKD over the wall and back onto the same green platform. That actually was sick. From there, I moved Mario onto the Cheez-It block section, which wasn't changed at all, but that didn't stop me from dying and having to redo everything beforehand. But I did finally reach the Shine Sprite, which meant it was now time for everyone's favorite, Shadow Mario. Of course, I'm being sarcastic when I say that, but to be honest, Pinna Park Shadow Mario actually wasn't that bad. This time, unlike any of the previous Shadow Marios, I knew for sure that hovering out of his dialogue box did not work, so now I wouldn't waste my time with that strat. All in all, this level only took me a little over 10 minutes. My strategy was to try and down Shadow Mario when he runs over the Yoshi Goron, and with save states to help, I got this to happen. Where'd I get him? Oh yeah, he's on the merry-go-round. He actually spins. That was actually so cool. Whoa. Even though I've been more or less kind of following the level order for the 80% speedrun, this is where I took a major detour. I kind of brushed over this in the previous video for the sake of storytelling, but throughout my playthrough of this hack, I was also playtesting it. That meant here and there, a section would be impossible to complete, so Matthew would step in, make a few tweaks, and we'd progress from there. Ricco Harbor episode 1 is a prime example of this. Initially, after making my way over to Goober Blooper's kennel, pulling the tentacle was impossible. So because of this, I decided to break from the standard 80% path and instead go to Noki Bay while Ricco 1 was being worked on. And just for the record and to be clear, it wasn't a type of thing where I tried to level a few times, decided it was too hard, then Matthew would come in to make it easier. I would exhaustively, and I really genuinely do mean exhaustively, try different strategies until I could say pretty conclusively that whatever I was trying was impossible. Okay, for real, it's time to go to Noki Bay. Starting off, I of course had to find a way to actually enter Noki. After a few tries, I figured out I could just barely look up enough to enter the level with a spin jump dive from the railing. Once I loaded into the level, I had a bit of uncertainty on how to actually get to the Monty Mole. I tried climbing up one of the pillars to see if that could do anything for me, and I was able to get onto this pulley, which felt like progress. And from the pulley, I pretty quickly realized I was able to jump off the meatballs and goobas to get closer to the cork. And after a few attempts and a bit of luck, I was able to make it onto the railing right next to the Monty Mole. Is lava up here too? From here, my next goal was to find a way to throw the bob-bombs at the Monty Mole, which was certainly easier said than done. For starters, it turns out the railing is too close to the mole for it to throw bob-bombs, as it hides away from Mario because he's too close. Well, sometimes the mole wouldn't hide away from Mario while he was on the fence. I could explain why, but honestly it's not that interesting. So, to bait the mole into throwing one of the ticking time bob-bombs, I had to hover forward, then backwards, back onto the rail. And after that, I'd of course wait for the bob-bomb to get right up against the railing before spraying and throwing it at the mole. But to complicate matters even further, once the Monty Mole is defeated, it starts one of those types of cutscenes where Mario will keep any momentum he had before the cutscene going into the cutscene. Luckily though, unlike Gelato 2, Mario doesn't get teleported during the cutscene, so all I had to do was find a way to get him to land somewhere safe after throwing the final bomb. It took me some time, but I was finally able to pull this off. Okay, I'm like on the cork. No, I'm not. I think this is good. This is what I did the first time, but I didn't make a safe state. Now, believe it or not, we're actually not quite done with the level. If you remember, I used the meatballs to help me climb up to the lookout area next to the waterfall. Of course, now that the mole has been launched off into infinity and beyond, there are no more meatballs for Mario to jump off of. And because the ruins don't actually open up in episode 1, I couldn't just climb up to where you fight Gooper Blooper and try to jump down to the shrine either. Lucky for us though, there is one more alternative, the rocket nozzle. After reaching it with a somewhat tightly timed fall damage boost, yes, you can take fall damage on lava, go watch part 1, I was able to parkour Mario's way up to the box. And after storing 4 rockets, for some reason I probably could have just used 3 to be honest, with a glitch called rocket storage, I launched Mario towards the Shine Sprite. And after a failed attempt, I finally completed Noki 1. Here's the clip. It's like under this platform, which actually makes it so hard. Oh wait, oh. Yeah, meant to do that. Meant to land on that fence, 100%. Moving into Noki 2, I pretty quickly realized that fighting Gooper Blooper would not be an option, nor would clipping through the wall with the spring, like we normally do in speedruns. So, what other option did I have? Well, you see, if I could somehow, someway get Mario high enough. Well, after using rocket storage, let past me explain the plan. Okay, so the goal is to go over the invisible wall. Like here. I think... yeah, we're definitely over the invisible wall. So what's going to happen is we're going to go through this. Nice. And we should land in the Shine Sprite somewhere around here. There we go. That was actually so cool. So far, Noki has been super interesting, but for episodes 3 and 4, this is where it would cool down, pun kind of intended, because, you know, lava... and it's hot and it would cool down, so whatever, that's not even a pun really. After dying because of game design, I entered red coins in a bottle, which was pretty much exactly vanilla. Really, the only thing of note here was the red coin in the cubbyhole, but on my second try, by very briefly letting go of the R button, I was able to shimmy Mario out of the hole. The last red coin was a bit nerve-wracking, but still very doable. Moving on to Noki 4, the eel fight, the only slightly notable thing was that it looked pretty cool. The lava actually kind of looked like it glowed, which I thought was pretty. Otherwise, the fight was vanilla, so I moved on to Piantissimo, who was a pushover. Still though, I died once to my Hubris, make that twice. On my third attempt though, I played it safe and slow and made out with my shine. In episode 6, making it up to the Shell Secret wasn't hard at all. What came after though is a bit of a different story. The Shell Secret is already one of the hardest levels in the game, so adding lava to it made it even harder. That said though, it certainly didn't cross the Lake Secret line, so after a few deaths and some tense moments, I was able to make my way to the shine at the end of the secret. Okay, Shadow Mario. What can I even say? Remember how in the outro of part 1, I said there was some genuinely crazy stuff here in part 2? Yeah, this is one of those crazy things I was referring to. So before we fully get into this level, let me give you guys a very brief refresher on Shadow Mario. Since it's very hard to chase him around, you often can only do incremental damage to Shadow Mario, which makes these levels very tedious. And on top of that, you have to be careful where you knock Shadow Mario down, since Mario has to be on the ground to talk to Shadow Mario, which is obviously a problem because most of the ground is deadly. Now, with Bianco and Pinna, I was able to down Shadow Mario while he was on safe ground, and with Gelato and Pianta, I was able to damage boost off an enemy to talk to him. Here in Noki, however, we seemingly have none of that. There is absolutely nothing around Shadow Mario's path that gives Mario enough frames of invulnerability to safely talk to him, and there is also absolutely nothing in Shadow Mario's path that provides safe ground for him to be downed on. Or is there? Cue the VSauce music. What if instead of Shadow Mario going to a safe piece of ground, the safe piece of ground and came to Shadow Mario. You see, in Shadow Mario's path around Noki Bay, he jumps off this cliff here into the water, and there just so happens to be a mud boat pretty nearby. Yeah, this is going where you think it's going. Skipping past all the failed strats that came before, I was able to place the boat right around here where Shadow Mario jumps off into the water, after some trial and error of course. My goal was to spray Shadow Mario and do a ton of damage to him on the way down so that hopefully I could down him once he landed up on the boat. I tried this strat again and again and again before finally, well, I gave up on it. I gave up on it so hard that I actually just left Noki altogether so that I could re-enter the stage. Why? Well, because the area that Shadow Mario starts in, well, he never comes back to. And I really wanted him in his starting position because instead of having him land in the boat, I wanted to slow him down with the boat. That way I could get Mario close enough to deal some serious damage with spam sprays and not praying that I get close enough to him while falling off the cliff. Which, by the way, if you didn't know, spam sprays are by far the best way to down Shadow Mario, given you're right up next to him. So, try after try after try, half an hour of loading the same, like, what, 5-10 second save state, I was finally able to do this. It's because I have noise cancellation on OBS right now, and I guess it's really good. I did it! I did it! I did it! Yeah! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Somebody clip that, please. Oh, let's go! Finally, after 2 hours on that one shine and nearly 4 hours in Noki, I had completed yet another world. After having completed Noki Bay, it was time to go back to Ricco Harbor, which now had been updated to actually be possible. On my way to Kooper Blooper, I got to use these little jumping blooper guys, which was pretty cool. Just like the spinning platforms from Bianco, I can't remember the last time I had to use these guys to actually make progress. Pretty neat. Now with a platform under his tentacle, I was able to safely awake Goop Bloop and start the fight. Now, this has got to be one of the most, if not the most interesting boss fight in this hack. You see, pulling Kooper Blooper's tentacles isn't an option here. I mean, you might be able to find a way, but that would probably just make the fight harder. Instead, it's a much safer bet to try and go for the speedrun strats. If you're unfamiliar with what I mean, I can quickly explain. The way you're supposed to fight Kooper Blooper is to pull his tentacles, then his mouth. If you pull its mouth first, then it'll just attack Mario with its inner tentacles at least. However, if you begin pulling his mouth while Goop Bloop's tentacles are in the middle of the attacking animation, then Kooper Blooper will never retaliate against Mario pulling its mouth. So, that's what I had to do here in Floor's Lava. But of course, it's not that easy, as there's a spinning platform in front of Kooper Blooper's mouth, which means that I had to really time everything perfectly. And honestly, there's not much else to say here. It was pretty straightforward what I had to do, and before long, I dealt damage to Kooper Blooper not just once, but twice. Although I did end up dying afterwards in a pretty funny way, which I want you guys to see. Yeah. Oh no! No! Dude, the camera was like lingering way longer than it usually does, so I was just sitting there like waiting. I quickly redid the fight, and so it was time for Ricco 2. The strategy here was just to hover into the water and swim over to the loading zone. Once inside, it was clear to me that I wouldn't be able to do the blooperless strats, so I just did the race as you're intended to do, no crazy strats here. For the caged shine sprite, I had to take a bit of a detour, but I was able to jump off this crane and grab onto the bottom of the cage like you normally would do in a speedrun. For Ricco 4, getting to the secret was a step or two away from the intended route, but the secret itself was a whole other story. Basically, I had to manage the cycles of these spinny wooden things since 2 of their 4 main sides were covered in lava. Now, it took me 20 minutes, but after a lot of trial and error, I found a route through the secret that got me to the shine. Again, kind of like Kooper Blooper, everything here was pretty straightforward, no noteworthy interesting tricks or optimizations. Honestly, my biggest enemy here was just patience, which cost me a lot of deaths. But finally, after quite a bit of time, everything was fine and I made it to the shine. Bars? Bars, bro? Bars? bloops. Sticking with the theme of the first Cooper blooper battle, Master Matt K had decided to add some moving geometry to make the fight more interesting. This time, I sprayed the goop off Goop Bloop's face from a distance before moving in to grab his mouth. Other than that, the fight really wasn't all that different from the first Cooper blooper fight. In fact, I'd say it was even a little easier. That of course leads us to Ricco 6, which was pretty much just vanilla, save for the fact I had to go into the water to get to the red coin button and serve bloopers. And after, it was time for Shadow Mario, who once again wasn't all that bad. Sure, the usual chase, stop, spray, repeat tactics are incredibly tedious, but at this point, I think I'm starting to get numb to the tedium, especially after the barrels only challenge run, link in the iCard. After spending honestly quite a while on trying to get some damage boost strategies to work, like with Gelato and Pianta, I eventually found out I could just down Shadow Mario by this piece of scaffolding, which by the way should have probably been made into lava, but I'm not complaining. Either way, that made Ricco a wrap, and therefore it was time for our final location before Corona Mountain, Sirena Beach. Not wanting to bother with stealing Yoshi back from Shadow Mario, I decided I'd just use a trick called early Sirena. You know, I'm realizing this after writing the script, but it's actually not called early Sirena, it's called Sirena Whenever, which is unfortunate because I made like a really stupid joke about, oh, well, I'm not doing early Sirena, I'm doing late early Sirena. Yeah, Anyways, after a few tries, I made it in and soon began my first attempt at the manta ray. But before I get ahead of myself, just in case you guys want to see the route I took to the hotel manager Pianta guy, well, it's been playing on screen for the past bit. So actually going into the details of Phantom Manta, I immediately knew that I wanted to be in the ocean. Even when the floor isn't lava, I have a hard time not getting hit by the smaller mantas, which of course sends Mario flying, which of course means he's probably gonna land on lava. But since the mantas don't swim, but instead just exist below the water, that makes the ocean an incredibly safe place to be while dealing with the mantas, if not a bit tedious. Once I made Mario's way into the ocean, it was just a matter of spam spraying, really, and after an incredibly unnecessary momentum spin jump, I closed out Sirena 1 with 44 shines. After doing another Sirena Whenever clip, first try, you can trust me on that one, I entered Sirena 2. Making my way up the totem pole to enter the boost secret was pretty straightforward, and so was the secret itself. Mostly. There was some light problem solving with the brick blocks, which have somewhat inspired me to want to make a custom lava brick block level, but more importantly, and on topic, was this jump right here. Man, it took me a lot of tries, but once I got it, I had felt like I'd evolved as a Sunshine player. Basically, by using Y-cam movement, which lets you change which direction Mario is facing basically anywhere, including midair or while sliding on a wall, I was able to spin jump, then change Mario's angle right before he began wall sliding. Once I had Mario's angle changed enough, I could then make a blind wall jump dive off the brick block towards the flying stew. You know, it doesn't sound that complicated when it's putting into the words, but trust me, at the time, it was a lot more than it looks like. From here, I breezed through the rest of the secret and soon enough collected the Shine Sprite to then move on to Sirena 3, which was pretty interesting. Normally in a Sunshine speedrun, we use what's called a fruit clip to skip past having to do all the intended stuff for this level. Now, what's interesting here is that the fruit clip is actually the only way to do this level, which on pen and paper might sound a bit lame, but in my opinion it's actually really cool because there is a mini puzzle involved having to get the banana up to the top, which is what I'm going to get to now. And skipping past all the trial and error, here's what I did to transport the banana. I'd first take Mario's way over to this table from his spawn point. Next, I'd spray this coconut out of the way so that Mario could stand on the fruit bar and grab a banana. Next, I made this deceptively precise jump back to the table, then moved to the next table over. Now from here, I'd throw the banana towards the totem pole, hoping it would land on the plant arrangements. To throw the banana far enough, however, I had to do a running jump throw, which was particularly dangerous since Mario can't hover after throwing something in the air. Luckily though, I was able to use this Pianta's head as a landing spot for Mario to get his hover back. And after a few tries, I successfully got the banana next to the totem pole, where I continued from there basically like normal, which, for the uninitiated, looks like this. Now entering the casino, it really wasn't all that different. Casino Skip was spared by the lava, so I didn't have to deal with slot machines or the weird flip panels to get to the pipe. But once I entered the secret, man, that's where things took a wild turn. For starters, the secret starts off with a mandatory glitchy wall kick. Next, after having to wait a few cycles for all the magic Rubik's cubes to line up perfectly, it was time for yet another GWK, which I didn't get on my first few tries. But after I finally did get the GWK, UK, I made Mario's way up and further towards the Shine Sprite, which is where the secret suddenly ramps up in difficulty. In the section with the lava-covered pegs that thrust their way in and out of these holes, it was clear that I only really had two options. Either one, I used Kenny Kicks, which is a trick used to infinitely wall jump up a wall, and once on top of this wall, I could basically skip straight to the spinny wooden platformy thing, which is basically at the end of the secret. But not only would that be lame compared to option 2, but I also just didn't know how to do Kenny Kicks at the time of playing this, so option 1 was completely off the table. Instead, I had to do option 2, which, well, is a bit hard to explain, so let me show you. There are periods in this level where the pegs aren't occupying their holes. It's during these windows of time that Mario can get inside these holes, but because Mario is so small and the pegs are so big, Mario can't stay inside one hole forever, as he'll get pushed out. So, while Mario is in one hole, I had to find a way to get him into another hole that doesn't yet have a peg in it. And yeah, it sounds as complicated as you probably are starting to think it is. Unfortunately though, I have to admit, there really isn't much more for me to say about the secret, and honestly that's quite unfortunate since this part was just so cool. So because of that, in the upcoming weeks or months, I'm going to be making a video where I try this entire level without save states, all in one go. Make sure to keep an eye out for that because it's going to be insane, I can already feel it. But that video is for the future, so let's get back on topic. Here's how I closed out Sirena 5. Okay, I'm making a safe state here. That was sick. Okay, this has definitely been the sickest secret yet. No! Okay, wow, that was Anyways, after Mario finished in the holes, I happily collected yet another Shine Sprite. Moving on to King Boo, he was actually a lot easier than I was fearing, but to be honest, that was also mostly because I relied on save states here as well, although this time I wasn't using them as a crutch for my skill, but my patience instead. Since this fight has been distilled to just be pure RNG here in Flora's Lava, I really didn't feel too guilty abusing save states to get my desired outcome for where the fruit landed, which, by the way, as a very quick aside, there has been some interest expressed in speedrunning this mod, and because of that, there will be several versions of this mod with varying difficulties and RNG and stuff like that, so yeah, if you want to speedrun this mod, you won't have to deal with crazy, you need save states to beat King Boo type of stuff. Okay, back to the script. And after an honestly pretty cool hit on King Boo, I moved on to Sirena 6, the episode where Mario has to clean up the whole beach while also under a time limit for some reason. Now, this episode was actually really hard, just because of the time limit. You see, there's only really one reliable source of water for Mario to refill flood at, which also is kind of out of the way, and since it's absolutely a fact that you will run out of water while cleaning the beach, having to work in a water refill on the route was honestly the toughest part. But after many tries, I finally cleaned up the beach with not much time left at all. I would get more into the specifics, but kinda like with Pianta 6 from last episode, all I really needed was some good old-fashioned speed, nothing insane. And finally, as for Shadow Mario, you guys have seen it all before. After some trial and error, I downed him in the right spot to damage boost off a Boo, which let Mario talk to him and safely hover away. And it didn't even take me that long to get this to happen, so yeah, there's just not much to say here. And with that, it was time for Corona Mountain and Bowser, the final shine of the game. Which more or less is just a victory lap. A bit anticlimactic, but what can I say? The Gauntlet of Corona Mountain was only slightly altered, although in interesting enough ways to actually slightly change my normal routing here. But once I made it to Bowser in his hot tub, well, just see for yourselves. You madman, Matthew. Yeah, so the only changes made to the final battle were visual, actually mostly for technical reasons. It was still legendary though, and with one final hit, I had finally beaten Super Mario Sunshine, but the floor is lava. So yeah, that's it. I've not got much else to say other than that if you want updates on when videos are going to come out, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I post regular updates on where I'm at during the production of my videos and other general YouTube stuff. I also post when I go live on Twitch, so yeah. I don't engage in any drama or anything like that on Twitter, so yeah, follow me and you won't regret it. Aside from that, thank you to Master Matt K for making this mod. Information on how you can play it for yourself is in the description and probably pinned comment. Anyways, I've been Angry Max. And later.